I told the alien woman. You have very beautiful eyes. She froze. The plasma conduit exploded with all the grace of a dying star, showering Kael's cockpit in sparks that would have been beautiful if they weren't currently trying to kill him. His cargo hauler, the Wandering Det, groaned like an old man getting out of bed as another volley from the pirate vessel scored across her hull. Arya, please tell me you have good news, Kael muttered, wrestling with controls that seemed determined to do the opposite of what he wanted. Define good, his ship's AI responded with the cheerful tone of someone delivering a cancer diagnosis. The good news is that we're no longer being shot at. And the bad news? We're plummeting toward that moon at approximately 3 times the recommended landing velocity. Also, I'm detecting some rather unfriendly radiation signatures from those crystals covering the surface. Oh, and our life support has about 6 hours left. Kael glanced at the viewscreen where the moon of Thessera Prime filled his vision like a geological middle finger. The entire surface sparkled with formations that looked like someone had bedazzled a planet. Could be worse. How, exactly? We could be out of coffee. We are out of coffee. Well, now it's worse. The ship bucked violently as they hit atmosphere, and Kael's teeth rattled in ways that probably violated several laws of physics. Through the chaos, he managed to glimpse massive crystalline structures jutting from the moon's surface like frozen lightning. Some part of his engineer's brain noted that the formation seemed almost too perfect, too organized to be entirely natural. That thought lasted exactly until a tree made entirely of what appeared to be living crystal whipped past his cockpit. Arya, are those trees made of crystal? Yes. Are they alive? Also yes. Are we about to crash into a forest of potentially sentient minerals? Absolutely. The impact came with the subtle delicacy of a freight train hitting a birthday cake. Kael's safety harness cut into his shoulders as the Wandering Det carved a furrow through crystalline undergrowth that chimed like wind chimes in a hurricane. When the world finally stopped moving, he hung upside down in his pilot's seat, watching droplets of coolant fall upward from a ruptured line. Status report, he groaned. Well, we're alive, which puts us ahead of my initial projections. The ship, however, is in what technical manuals would describe as completely screwed. I'm reading hull breaches in sections 3 through 7. The main drive is making sounds that violate several decency laws, and something is growing on the port sensor array. Kael unbuckled himself and dropped to what used to be the cockpit ceiling. Outside, the crystal forest stretched in all directions, each tree pulsing with soft bioluminescent patterns that reminded him uncomfortably of neural networks. Growing. I believe it's some form of crystalline organism. It appears to be curious about our technology. Fantastic. How long for repairs? Assuming we can source replacement parts from the local crystal gift shop? 4 days, minimum. Kael sighed and pulled his emergency kit from its wall mount. The kit contained the usual survival essentials: water purification tablets, emergency rations that tasted like cardboard seasoned with regret, a multi-tool, and a plasma pistol that had seen better decades. He was checking the pistol's charge when Arya's tone shifted to something approaching concern. Kael, I'm detecting movement patterns in the local crystalline matrix that suggest intelligence. Organized intelligence. Define organized. The kind that builds cities underground and has been watching our entire crash sequence with what I can only describe as professional interest. Before Kael could ask for clarification, the forest around his ship began to sing. It started as a low harmonic that seemed to come from the crystals themselves, then built into something complex and multi-layered. The sound wasn't entirely unpleasant, but it made his teeth itch. Translation? He asked. Roughly, "Hey, new guy, you're coming with us." The crystalline trees began to part like curtains, revealing figures moving through the prismatic light. They wore form-fitting suits that seemed to be grown rather than manufactured, each one incorporating living crystal elements that pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats. But what caught Kael's attention were their faces, human in every way except for ears that swept back in elegant points, giving them an otherworldly beauty that made his breath catch. The figure in the lead removed her helmet, revealing features that belonged in classical sculpture and hair that shifted color like oil on water. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, fixed on him through the cockpit window with the intensity of someone conducting a very important interview. "Arya," Kael whispered, "please tell me they look friendly." They look like they're deciding whether to study you or dissect you. That's not encouraging. Look on the bright side, Arya chirped. At least now we know what happened to all those exploration ships that went missing in this sector. The woman raised one graceful hand, and Kael felt his ship systems respond in ways they definitely weren't designed to. His cockpit hatch cycled open with a soft hiss. Well, Kael said, holstering his pistol and trying to look like the kind of person who crashed into alien forests all the time, let's go make some new friends. The holding cell was surprisingly comfortable, which somehow made it more unsettling. Kael sat on what appeared to be a chair grown from a single piece of crystal, watching patterns of light flow through the transparent walls like slow-motion lightning. 3 days had passed since his capture, and he'd learned exactly 3 things about his hosts. They made excellent food, they had no concept of privacy, and their leader had the most expressive eyebrows in known space. You realize, he said to the air, knowing they were monitoring him, that keeping me locked up is a waste of everyone's time. I'm much more entertaining when I'm not behind bars. The wall shimmered, and Elyra stepped through it like it was made of water. Her pointed ears twitched slightly, something Kael had noticed she did when she was either annoyed or amused. He was hoping for amused. Entertaining? She asked, settling into another crystal chair that formed itself from the floor. Is that how you describe illegally entering our space and crash landing in our most sacred grove? I prefer unscheduled arrival with excessive enthusiasm. And technically, your space isn't marked on any star charts, so how could I know it was illegal? The same way most intelligent beings avoid walking into volcanoes, they use their survival instincts. Kael grinned. My survival instincts have been filing complaints about my life choices for years. I stopped listening to them around the time I decided to become a deep space trader. Something that might have been a smile flickered across Elyra's face before she caught it. Your species fascinates our behavioral analysts. According to their reports, humans consistently make decisions that are statistically likely to result in death or dismemberment, yet you continue to survive through what can only be described as aggressive optimism. That's the nicest way anyone's ever described my life philosophy. Elyra touched a section of the wall, and it became transparent, revealing a vast underground city that took Kael's breath away. Spires of living crystal twisted toward a ceiling that pulsed with artificial starlight, while walkways of solidified energy connected structures that defied several fundamental laws of architecture. Beings moved through the spaces with fluid grace, their pointed ears and color-shifting hair marking them as Elyra's people. Welcome to Veilthes, she said. The city my ancestors built when they realized that the surface universe was populated by species who solve problems by shooting at them. Not all of us, Kael protested. Some of us solve problems by running away very quickly. A marginally more sensible approach. He watched a transport platform float past, carrying what looked like a family of 4. The children, recognizable despite their alien features, were playing some sort of holographic game that left trails of light in the air. How long have you been down here? Approximately 800 of your years. We've been monitoring galactic civilization since before your species developed interstellar travel. We've watched empires rise and fall, seen countless wars fought over resources that could be synthesized or territories that will be meaningless in a cosmic blink. And you decided we were all too stupid to live? Elyra's laugh was like silver bells being dropped into a crystal cave. Not too stupid. Too young. Your species, all the spacefaring species, are still in their adolescent phase. You're powerful enough to cause tremendous damage but lack the wisdom to prevent it. Says the woman whose people hide underground while the rest of the galaxy burns. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. We don't hide, Elyra said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the walls resonate. We prepare. For what? For the day when the young species either grow up or destroy themselves trying. Kael felt the conversation shifting into dangerous territory. He'd met enough revolutionaries and zealots to recognize the tone. And if they choose option 2? Then we ensure the survivors learn from their mistakes. That sounds ominously helpful. Elyra stood and moved to the wall display, her fingers dancing over controls that weren't quite solid. The view shifted to show orbital platforms bristling with technology that made Kael's head hurt just looking at it. My people have developed certain capabilities during our isolation. We could end every current conflict in the galaxy within a standard month. But you don't. Because forced peace is just another form of tyranny. Growth must come from within, or it doesn't come at all. Kael joined her at the wall, careful to maintain what he hoped was a respectful distance. This close, he could see that her skin had a subtle luminescence, as if lit from within. So what happens to me? Permanent vacation in Crystal Paradise. That depends. My council wants you disposed of. They see you as a contamination risk. Disposed of? That's a cheerful euphemism. I prefer permanently archived. Not really an improvement. Elyra turned to face him, and Kael found himself looking into eyes that held depths he couldn't fathom. I've been arguing for a different approach. Your knowledge of current galactic politics could be valuable. Your ship's navigation logs contain information about trade routes, military positions, political tensions. And all I have to do is betray everyone I've ever worked with? You could help us understand whether your people are ready for contact. Kael considered this. What makes you think I wouldn't just tell you what you want to hear to save my own skin? Because, Elyra said, despite evidence to the contrary, I believe you're fundamentally honest. Foolishly so. You're basing that on 3 days of observation? I'm basing it on the fact that your first instinct upon crashing was to check if your ship's AI was functioning properly rather than securing your own escape route. Kael blinked. You were watching that? We were watching everything. Including your attempt to repair a plasma conduit while hanging upside down and arguing with your computer about the proper seasoning for emergency rations. That was a private conversation. Privacy is a luxury of species who don't live underground in a collective society. A chime echoed through the room, and Elyra's expression grew serious. The Council has reached a decision. It seems we're about to find out whether my faith in your character is justified or catastrophically misplaced. The Council chamber looked like the inside of a geode that had been hit by a disco ball explosion. 12 figures sat in chairs that floated at various heights around a central platform where Kael stood trying not to look as nervous as he felt. Each council member had the same elegant pointed ears as Elyra, but their faces bore the weight of centuries in ways that made him feel like a mayfly addressing a convention of redwood trees. The human will speak, announced a particularly stern-looking woman whose hair shifted through shades of silver like liquid mercury. Explain why your species deserves to continue existing. Kael cleared his throat. Well, that's quite an opening question. Usually people start with, "How's the weather?" A male counselor with blue-tinted skin leaned forward. Your flippancy in the face of extinction judgment demonstrates precisely the adolescent behavior counselor the Wren referenced in her report. Actually, Kael said, my flippancy in the face of extinction judgment demonstrates that I've been in mortal peril so often that I've developed a coping mechanism. It's either jokes or a nervous breakdown, and jokes are more socially acceptable. Elyra, who floated slightly apart from the others, made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. The silver-haired counselor, apparently the Wren, shot her a disapproving look. You admit your species is inherently unstable? I admit my species is inherently creative. We don't handle boredom well, so we invented things like faster-than-light travel, quantum computing, and sandwich combinations that violate the laws of physics. Your creativity has also produced weapons capable of sterilizing entire worlds, another counselor interjected. True, Kael nodded. But we've also produced music that can make people weep with joy, stories that inspire hope across species barriers, and a beverage called coffee that has single-handedly prevented more wars than any peace treaty. Theron's expression remained skeptical. You would have us believe that your chaotic nature is beneficial? I'm saying chaos and order need each other. Your people have achieved perfect harmony, perfect peace, perfect isolation. But what have you created in the last century besides really impressive architecture? The chamber fell silent. Kael immediately wondered if he'd crossed a line from boldly honest into fatally insulting. Elaborate, Elyra said quietly. You've been watching us for 800 years, right? Studying us like specimens in a lab. But when was the last time you were surprised? When did you last discover something that changed how you see the universe? Counselor Theron's chair lowered until she was at eye level with Kael. We have transcended the need for surprise. We have achieved stability. Stability is another word for stagnation. My people may be young and reckless, but we're also growing, changing, becoming something new every generation. Yeah, we make mistakes. Huge, catastrophic, embarrassing mistakes. But we learn from them. Do you? Asked the blue-skinned counselor. Your history suggests you repeat the same conflicts, the same errors, across millennia. The details change. The technology improves. The scale gets bigger. But each time, more people survive, more lessons get learned, and the next cycle gets a little bit better. It's messy and inefficient and probably looks insane from the outside, but it's how growth works. Elyra drifted closer. What would you say to those who argue that your species' growth comes at too high a cost? That your wars and conflicts cause suffering that could be prevented through guidance? Kael met her eyes, sensing this was the crucial moment. I'd say that forced evolution isn't evolution at all. If you prevent someone from making mistakes, you also prevent them from developing the wisdom to avoid those mistakes in the future. Every species has to earn their place in the universe, even if they might destroy themselves in the process, especially if they might destroy themselves. The possibility of failure is what makes success meaningful. Theron's hair had shifted to a deep red that probably wasn't a good sign. Your philosophy would justify any atrocity in the name of learning experience. No, Kael said firmly. My philosophy would justify helping people learn to make better choices rather than making those choices for them. There's a difference between a teacher and a dictator. And which are we? Elyra asked. Right now, neither. You're spectators. But I think you're getting bored with the show. The council members exchanged glances that seemed to carry entire conversations. Kael waited, trying to read expressions that had been perfected over centuries of political maneuvering. Finally, Theron spoke. The council will deliberate. You will return to your quarters. That's it? No vote, no dramatic pronouncement, no ominous countdown. This is not entertainment, human. Everything's entertainment if you have the right perspective. As the crystal platform beneath his feet began to move, Elyra caught his attention. Her expression was unreadable, but something in her eyes suggested the conversation was far from over. Back in his cell, which he'd started thinking of as his suite, since the amenities were better than most hotels, Kael found his dinner waiting. The Elyra had mastered the art of making food that looked like jewels and tasted better than anything he'd eaten in his 32 years of life. He was halfway through something that resembled crystallized starlight but tasted like the best chocolate in the universe when his walls shimmered. Instead of Elyra, a young Elyra male stepped through, carrying what looked like a toolbox made of living wood. I am Jorin, the newcomer said, his accent softer than Elyra's formal tones. I have been assigned to repair the damage to your vessel. Kael nearly choked on his chocolate starlight. They're letting me go? The council has not yet decided your fate. However, Counselor Elyra argued that maintaining your ship demonstrates our, what is the phrase, technological superiority without causing permanent damage to our strategic capabilities. That's very thoughtful of her. Jorin grinned, and Kael realized he was probably the Elyra equivalent of a teenager. Between us, I think she likes you. What makes you say that? She has never before argued with the full council for 3 days straight over the fate of a single alien. Also, she specifically requested that I repair your ship to better than original specifications, which is either an insult or a compliment. With Counselor Elyra, it is often both. The wandering det hummed with new life, her system singing in harmonies that definitely weren't in the original specifications. Jorin had outdone himself. The ship now had crystalline matrix cores that could process data at quantum speeds, hull plating that could self-repair minor damage, and a coffee maker that actually worked properly for the first time in 5 years. I feel like I should be jealous, Arya commented as Kael ran through the pre-flight checklist. The ship has never sounded this happy. Are you complaining about your upgrades? Absolutely not. I now have access to processing power that allows me to contemplate the mathematical beauty of existence while simultaneously calculating optimal sandwich-to-coffee ratios. It's quite liberating. Kael laughed, but his attention was drawn to the observation deck where Elyra stood silhouetted against the swirling colors of the Thessera Nebula. The council had finally reached their decision after 6 days of debate. He was free to go, with the understanding that any attempt to reveal the location of Veilthes would result in what the Wren had delicately termed aggressive memory modification. "She's been standing there for an hour," Arya observed. "According to my behavioral analysis algorithms, she's experiencing what humans would classify as emotional conflict." "Since when do you have behavioral analysis algorithms?" "Since about 10 minutes ago. The Veilthera computational matrix is quite generous with its processing gifts." Kael saved his checklist and headed for the observation deck. The ship's corridors felt different now, not just cleaner and more efficient, but somehow more alive. He suspected the Veilthera upgrades went deeper than mere technology. Elyra didn't turn when he approached, but her ears twitched in acknowledgement of his presence. "Your ship is ready for departure. Thanks to Jorin. Kid's got talent." He was excited to work on such primitive technology. Apparently, human engineering is delightfully chaotic and refreshingly inefficient. "Those are the kindest compliments my ship has ever received." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the nebulous shifting patterns paint the observation deck in aurora colors. Finally, Elyra spoke. "The council voted to maintain our isolation." "I figured as much." The Wren didn't seem like the type to change her mind easily. "She's not wrong, you know. Your species isn't ready for contact with us. The technology gap alone would cause societal disruption on a massive scale." "But..." Elyra's smile was barely visible in the nebula's glow. "But you knew there was a but." "There's always a but. It's one of the fundamental constants of the universe. Right up there with the speed of light and the tendency of toast to land butter side down. We've decided to observe more closely. Selected members of our people will travel among the galactic community, gathering information, providing subtle assistance where appropriate." "Cultural exchange program?" "Something like that." Kael felt something shift in his chest, a sensation he'd been trying to ignore for the past week. Sounds dangerous for a species that values isolation. "All growth involves risk." Elyra turned to face him, and he was struck again by the depth in her eyes. "Your words to the council were illuminating. We've spent centuries achieving perfection, but perfection is another word for stagnation. I may have stolen that line from a philosophy textbook. The source matters less than the truth." The ship's intercom crackled softly. "Kael," Arya's voice said, "I hate to interrupt what my newly acquired emotional recognition subroutines classify as a moment, but you should know that Counselor Elyra has submitted a formal request to join your crew as a cultural liaison." Kael's heart performed what felt like a complex gravitational slingshot maneuver. "She what?" Elyra's cheeks took on a subtle luminescence that he was learning meant embarrassment. "I may have been impulsive. The council approved my request before I could discuss it with you." "You want to travel with me? In this ship?" "Eating emergency rations and listening to Arya's complaints about my life choices. I've spent 800 years watching the galaxy through sensors and reports. I find myself curious about experiencing it directly. It's not glamorous. Most of my jobs involve hauling cargo from one end of space to the other while trying to avoid pirates, tax collectors, and the occasional interdimensional anomaly." "That sounds refreshing." Arya's voice returned, tinged with what might have been amusement. "For what it's worth, my analysis suggests that Counselor Elyra's presence would significantly improve both our survival odds and the quality of our dinner conversations." Kael found himself grinning. "Well, when the ship's AI approves, who am I to argue? Is that a yes?" "That depends. Can you handle close quarters with someone whose idea of sophisticated technology is percussive maintenance?" "I'm willing to learn." "And can you tolerate really terrible jokes during life-threatening situations?" "I believe I've demonstrated that tolerance already." Kael extended his hand. Welcome aboard the Wandering Det, Cultural Liaison Elyra. Try not to let Arya convince you that reorganizing the cargo hold according to quantum efficiency principles is a good use of your time. I heard that, Arya protested. Elyra took his hand, her skin warm despite its crystalline luminescence. I look forward to the adventure. As they shook hands, Kael felt the ship systems respond to her presence, the Elyra technology recognizing one of its creators. The observation deck's transparency increased, giving them an even clearer view of the nebula's beauty. Your eyes, Kael said quietly, the words escaping before he could stop them. They're very beautiful. Elyra froze, her hand still clasped in his. For a moment that stretched like a held breath, her composed facade cracked, revealing something vulnerable and achingly real. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. Thank you, she whispered. No one has ever. I mean, among my people, such observations are considered too human, too honest. The ship's engines hummed to life around them, ready to carry them both toward whatever waited among the stars. Kael realized that somewhere between crashing into her world and arguing with her council, he'd stopped being just a traitor running from his past and become someone worthy of the trust she was placing in him. Well, he said, reluctantly releasing her hand, honesty is something I've got in abundance. Fair warning, though, it gets me in trouble more often than it gets me out of it. I'm counting on it, Elyra replied, and this time her smile held all the promise of uncharted worlds. The end.